"Step back," said the guard. His voice cut like a rifle report, sharp, commanding, final. The child froze mid-step, 1 foot past the velvet rope. A father's hand grabbed his shoulder too late. 20 paces away, SPC Victor Reyes never flinched. His boots struck stone. Clack, then silence. Another step. Clack! Another! His jaw was clenched like stone under his polished cover. The M14 hugged his shoulder. Third watch, no second chances. The wind dragged a rip through the flags above the memorial. Clouds hung low and gray over Arlington's hills, the rows of white headstones dissolving into mist. Reyes turned, sharp, measured, precise. He faced east. He began the return 21. Then, distant engines. A low hum beyond the gates. Staff Sergeant Elijah Brooks, posted off Plaza, stiffened at the sound. He knew that motorcade. "Dunn!" Sergeant Marcus Dunn looked up from beneath the canopy. "That's not on schedule." Down the road, black SUVs turned toward the Memorial Amphitheater. The American flags on their hoods snapped taut in the wind. At the center, the unmistakable armor of the presidential limo. A murmur rippled through the honor flight crowd. Phones rose, uniforms straightened. Victor Reyes didn't move. His boots fell in rhythm. Clack, clack, clack. 21, stop. Turn, face north. The President of the United States, Nathaniel Kearns, had stepped out before the convoy halted. No press, no speech, only the hollow silence of the sacred plaza. "Doesn't matter," Brooks said under his breath. He moved, fast, straight to the rope line. Kearns walked slowly, deliberately. His overcoat caught the breeze. 2 Secret Service agents flanked him. He crossed the paving stones toward the line. Victor didn't break stride. At the 21st step, he turned again. Rifle switched shoulders. Snap, eyes forward. Marble beneath. Unknown before him. President behind him. Boots echoing. Cameras clicking. A voice. "It's the president. He's walking up." Brooks intercepted. He planted himself just inside the rope line, directly in front of Kearns. No salute, no motion, no compromise. Kearns stopped, inches away. Behind him, a Secret Service agent stepped forward. Brooks turned his eyes slightly. Just enough. "I wouldn't." Silence. The wind slowed. The flags above the tomb curled slightly inward, draped in that sacred hush. Kearns looked past him, toward the white marble sarcophagus, toward the man standing guard. Reyes's hands never trembled, but his eyes, just briefly, welled. He blinked. They were gone. "Do you know who I am, Sergeant?" Kearns asked, his voice low, controlled. Brooks answered without blinking. "Sir, I know who's buried here." Silence. The only sound was Reyes's next step. Clack. Camera shutters snapped like distant thunder. The honor flight crowd had fallen completely silent. The children, the veterans, the escorts, the tourists. Even the wind seemed to listen. From a distance, Sergeant Dunn whispered like a prayer. "Hold your post, Reyes." Brooks stood his ground. Kearns's jaw tensed. His hands, ungloved, rested against each other in front of him. His eyes fell. He looked at the marble, at the words carved into its face. "Here rests in honored glory an American soldier. Known but to God, no man's title stood above that." The president took a slow step back. Brooks didn't move, didn't flinch. His hand still hovered subtly near the rope. His frame never relaxed. Then, Reyes turned again. He marched, rifle crisp, shoulders straight. And for one frozen instant, the world beheld him. A single soldier, soaked in reverence, crossing the marble like a shadow of every soul buried in those hills. The flags behind him cracked in unison. The tomb glowed pale in the gray light. The president silenced. Clack, clack, clack. The child who had breached the rope now stood still, eyes wide, hand over heart. Behind him, his father whispered, "He's still walking." He didn't even blink. No one spoke. The change was not complete. The ritual had not ended. And so Reyes, trembling heart, unshaken steps, marched on. Brooks slowly stepped back to position, just inside the canopy. Dunn exhaled through his nose, fists unclenching. The motorcade idled, waiting. No orders, no applause, no headline. Only the soldier, the tomb, and a president who had just remembered what honor looks like. "Step aside, Sergeant." The words weren't barked. They were delivered quietly like a favor being asked in front of a casket. But SSG Elijah Brooks didn't move. He stood squared to the President of the United States, rope line taut against his thigh, jaw locked, eyes unmoved. Behind him, SPC Victor Reyes held his post, boots locked in the sacred cadence. The rifle never wavered. Clack, turn, clack. It wasn't over. The change continued, and the line does not move. Kearns took one step forward. Only one. Secret Service watched Brooks carefully. So did the honor flight crowd. Some veterans now crying, hats in hand. The silence waited with awe. From the shadows under the canopy, SGT Marcus Dunn gritted his teeth. Brooks said nothing. The velvet rope between them didn't sag. His body kept it suspended like a drawbridge raised. "Sergeant," Kearns said again, now with that edge a man gets when he's used to power doing the talking. "I've buried friends under that stone." Brooks: "Sir, then you understand." Kearns stared. A flag behind the memorial snapped hard in the wind. A beat passed. Then from behind them, clack, Reyes's boots marked the 21st step again. He turned. The ceremony had not faltered. Not once. From the other side of the rope, the President's lead Secret Service agent leaned in. "Mr. President, protocol." Kearns exhaled slowly through his nose. He looked past Brooks, across the plaza, to the tomb, its stone white and eternal. Its silence, louder than words, its sentinel unbroken. He stepped back. The air shifted. Pressure released. A few quiet sighs rippled through the crowd. But Brooks didn't blink, didn't thank him, didn't move from the rope, because the change was still underway. Only after Reyes reached the final turn, only when his last step, clack, marked the closing movement, did Brooks nod once, barely. Dunn stepped forward to relieve Reyes. The rifle transferred, smooth, flawless. Reyes's eyes never left the tomb, his salute sharp, shoulders square. Dunn: "Well done, soldier." Reyes, chest heaving: "I almost dropped it." When he stepped up, Brooks walked past. "You didn't." From the side, a press photographer whispered, "Did the guard just block the president?" Someone answered, "No, he honored the unknown." Then came the real storm. A senior aide approached Kearns with a phone. "Sir, you're trending. Snubbed by the guard. Front page within the hour." The president looked back toward the memorial. Brooks was gone now, into the barracks. But Reyes remained on the edge of the plaza, chest rising and falling, fingers twitching subtly from adrenaline. Kearns watched him for a long moment. "I wasn't snubbed," he said finally. He turned to the aide. "I was reminded." The aide raised an eyebrow. "Of what, sir?" Kearns: "That my rank doesn't outrank sacrifice." Thunder rumbled again in the distance. Real this time, not metaphor. The wind grew colder. Dunn stepped to Reyes's side under the canopy. "You good?" Reyes nodded, but he was pale. "I could feel it, him behind me, watching." He hesitated. "I thought, what if I turn? What if I freeze?" Dunn studied him. "You didn't." Reyes looked down at his gloves. They trembled, just barely. He clenched his fists. "I don't know if I could do it again." Dunn placed a gloved hand on his shoulder. "You will, or you won't. That's what this place is for. It doesn't lie." Inside the barracks, Brooks removed his gloves. His fingers were white beneath them. He sat alone at the long wooden bench where generations of guards had sat. No medal for what he just did. Possibly a reprimand, possibly worse. But the line had held, and the unknown had been honored. He looked up at the inscription above the locker room mirror. "My standard will remain perfection." Thunder outside, louder. Brooks muttered to himself, "That includes presidents." "Lightning strike. 3 miles out." Dunn's voice carried through the radio, clipped and calm. Inside the barracks, the monitor blinked. A swirling mass of green and red rolling toward Arlington. "Protocol says pull him," Dunn added. Brooks didn't answer. He stood behind the monitor, arms crossed, eyes locked on the feed. Out on the plaza, Victor Reyes stood alone. One figure against the stone, one sentinel against the coming storm. Wind cut low through the plaza, flags snapping so hard the sound mimicked gunfire. The crowd had thinned. Honor flight buses rolled slowly back down Eisenhower Drive. A few stragglers watched from the trees, umbrellas useless against the sideways rain. Still, clack. Reyes's boots struck like thunder on the marble. Wet, heavy, certain. Brooks finally spoke. "Let him choose." Dunn's brow furrowed. "He's probationary. He doesn't get that choice." Brooks didn't blink. "He's earned it." Outside, rain lands sideways across the plaza, slamming into Reyes's uniform. Water streamed from the brim of his cover. His gloves, once crisp, were soaked, molding to the rifle stock like flesh to bone. He stopped, turned, faced the tomb. Then, thunder, close, violent. Reyes's eyes twitched, his fingers flexed. Every instinct screamed, "Run, get clear, take cover." Inside, Dunn clenched the radio. "Reyes, do you hear me?" No answer. Brooks stepped to the doorway. And then, the rifle moved, up, crisp, shoulder to shoulder. Reyes's arms shook, but the rifle held. One step. Clack. He was staying. Brooks closed his eyes just for a moment. Inside the barracks, even the seasoned sergeant stopped breathing, because now it wasn't performance, it wasn't drill, it was choice, and only the unknown could hear him make it. Thunder crashes. The sky cracked open. Reyes's heart pounded behind the soaked wool of his coat. He could feel each breath tearing its way into cold lungs. Boots slipped just slightly with each pass, but he corrected, every time. Behind him, across the mall, the faint hum of engines. One SUV, no convoy, black, discreet. Inside it, President Kearns. No press, no flag, no aid. He sat watching, windows down, rain misting across the glass. Reyes turned again, each movement slower now, but not broken. His head bowed just enough to drain the rain from his brow. Eyes locked forward. And then he stepped. One step forward, then another. A full cycle. Clack, clack. Lightning forked behind the tomb, slashing through the sky like a bayonet. And Reyes marched straight into it. Legendary moment. Reyes, alone in the center of the marble, soaked through and shaking, lifts his rifle to formation, just as a bolt of lightning splits the sky behind the memorial. His silhouette carved in fire and storm. Inside the SUV, Kearns whispered something. The driver turned. "Sir?" Kearns didn't answer. He just kept watching. Watching the man who had refused to break. When he had walked up the rope line, when the storm crashed down, and now when every order would have allowed retreat. "Who is he?" The driver checked a list. "Specialist Victor Reyes, 3rd watch, under Sergeant Brooks." Kearns nodded slowly, and then he opened the door. Inside the barracks, Brooks heard the engine shut off. He stepped back from the doorway. Dunn whispered, "He's here." Rain soaked. The stone entrance as the president stepped under the canopy, dripping, alone. He removed his ring and slipped it into his coat. Brooks approached. No salute, just eyes. "I'm not here for ceremony," Kearns said. "I'm here to watch what it looks like when duty chooses to suffer." Brooks nodded toward the plaza. "He has no rank out there, just responsibility." Thunder again, louder. Then silence. They watched, together. On the plaza, Reyes turned one final time. Boots splashed. Rain stung his eyes. Arms trembling from cold, exhaustion, pressure. But the steps came anyway. Each one a salute to every soul unknown, every name lost, every silence that ever deserved a voice. Inside the barracks, no one moved. No one breathed. Then, the final step. Reyes stopped. The rifle came down in perfect silence. He turned, faced the tomb, and raised it high. President Kearns, still soaked, said softly, "Let them teach us all what it means to serve." "Take a seat, Specialist." The words echoed harder than they were spoken, not because they were loud, but because they came from a man wearing a silver oak leaf and a clipboard. Major Paul Weber, Department of Defense Inspector General's Office. Dress uniform so crisp it could cut glass. Eyes scanning Reyes like a liability form. Reyes sat, straight back, soaked soul. Inside the tomb guard barracks, the sanctity of silence had been breached by brass. Outside, the plaza still glistened from the storm. But in here, the real thunder was bureaucratic. Major Weber, do you know why you're here? Reyes, because I stood my post. Weber didn't blink. No, specialist. You're here because he, pointing at a closed door behind which Brooks sat, chose to defy direct access to the tomb by the commander-in-chief. Reyes said nothing. Weber leaned in. And you chose to remain on post during what qualifies as an authorized withdrawal under storm protocol. Silence. A ceiling fan above buzzed faintly. A distant bugle played a funeral melody across the grounds. Dunn stood against the wall, arms crossed, watching every breath Reyes took. He saw the boy who stepped into the storm, now watching him drown under fluorescent light. Weber, I'm not here to dishonor your commitment. I'm here to determine if Sergeant Brooks acted outside his authority and if your silence constitutes insubordination or complicity. He slid a paper across the table. Read it. Sign it. We're done. Reyes stared at the page, his name typed clean. Boxes, language, consequences. One sentence at the bottom. I acknowledge that SSG Brooks failed to defer to lawful authority. Reyes's fingers tapped the pen once. Dunn stepped forward. You don't have to. Weber raised a hand. Sergeant, stand down. Dunn's jaw clenched. He looked to Reyes, nodded once. Up to you, soldier. Reyes looked down again. Rain from his soaked sleeve dripped onto the form, a single dot, then another. He looked up, voice calm, measured, true. I don't remember seeing a man out there who needed deferring to. Weber squinted. Excuse me? Reyes leaned forward. I remember feeling the wind peel skin from my face. I remember the flags snapping like rifle cracks. I remember standing between the unknown and the world. And I remember a man behind me, but not above me. Weber's face hardened. He snatched the form back. That'll be all, Specialist. Reyes stood, stiff, silent, and walked out. Dunn followed. Outside, the corridor buzzed with whispers. Other guards half-turned from lockers, eyes following the path of the man who had just refused to sell his commander for comfort. Brooks stood alone at the far end of the hall, waiting, his uniform already prepped for his own interrogation. Reyes approached, stopped, saluted. I didn't sign it, Sergeant. Brooks returned the salute. I didn't expect you to. They held eye contact for a moment longer than protocol allowed, then broke. Scene shift. Barracks conference room, 1 hour later. Brooks sat alone across from Weber. Same clipboard, same tone, but a sharper edge now. Weber, you denied access to the president. Brooks, I denied breach of sacred ground. Weber, you outranked the commander-in-chief? Brooks, I upheld the rank of the fallen. Weber stood, face red. You think this place exists apart from command? Brooks, no. I think it exists because command is human and fallible. He stood, not defiant, just tall. This place is for the infallible, the ones who gave everything. No speeches, no power, just sacrifice. Legendary moment. Brooks stands as Major Weber storms out, his shadow cast across the marble plaque listing the names of tomb guards past. Behind him, a glass case holds a folded flag, still damp from the storm. Weber slammed the door behind him. Silence, echoed by boots in the hallway. Dunn appeared in the doorway, arms folded, expression unreadable. You just bought yourself trouble, Eli. Brooks exhaled. Good. Means I bought Reyes peace. Dunn stepped inside, dropped a folder on the bench. Internal memo. President Kearns submitted a private statement. Brooks paused. What did he say? Dunn's eyes flicked to the page, then back up. He said you reminded him who this country belongs to. Brooks sat down slowly, the weight of the uniform never heavier. Outside, a new sentinel took post. The line had held. For now. Reyes stood alone outside, eyes closed, hand on the marble railing. A whisper escaped his lips. Never above, never below, only beside. You're not on schedule, sir. Brooks didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. President Kearns stood at the west entrance to the tomb plaza. No press, no flag, no staff. Just himself. Overcoat folded over his arm, leather gloves tucked into his belt. He nodded once. I didn't come to be seen. Brooks stepped forward, blocking passage by instinct now. Then why are you here? Kearns looked out across the stone expanse. The tomb glowing faintly beneath a thin layer of morning frost. Fog curling over headstones like ghosts kneeling in prayer. I came to stand with them. If I'm allowed. A long pause. Brooks studied the man, stripped of power, drenched in intent. Behind them, SPC Reyes and SGT Dunn stood silently under the canopy, watching, waiting. Brooks broke the silence. Then you follow our rules. His voice low, unyielding. You stand, you speak nothing, you hold still, and you do not draw attention to yourself. Kearns nodded once. Understood. Brooks turned. Then fall in. They walked across the plaza together. Brooks, Reyes, Dunn, and the president. No cameras, no fanfare. Only breath, boots, and mist. Clack, clack, clack. Reyes stepped into formation first, rifle gleaming even under gray light. He had earned this post not by perfect drill, but by imperfect fire. Dunn joined him, silent, center, the man who kept the old ways alive. Brooks took far left. No command patch, no distinction, just the gait of a man who remembered every name not written. And then, Kearns. He stood where no president had ever stood, in the line. For 21 minutes, they said nothing. No sound beyond wind and crows overhead. No movement but the subtle shifting of frost from stone under warming light. The tomb loomed behind them, a monument to no name and every name. Somewhere beyond the trees, a school bus paused for flag raising. A janitor across the cemetery stopped mid-mop to look toward the fog. An old veteran in a wheelchair saluted from behind the wrought iron fence, unaware of who stood in formation. Inside the barracks, a clock ticked. Staff watched the monitor with reverent stillness. No commentary, only awe. Legendary moment. 4 figures, Brooks, Reyes, Dunn, and the president, stand shoulder to shoulder before the tomb of the unknown soldier. Fog behind them, sun cresting, their shadows stretched toward the resting place of the fallen. No name spoken, just presence. When the final minute passed, Brooks turned his head slightly. Not an order, not even a nod, just a motion shared between soldiers who understood. They stepped back, 1 pace, together. Then, salute, together. Kearns held his longer than the others. His hand trembled, just slightly. He dropped it last. No words. Until they reached the plaza's edge. Kearns looked to Brooks. Is that what it feels like? Brooks kept walking. I don't know what it feels like to be president, sir. A pause. But I know what it feels like to be with them. Reyes stopped, turned. The silence weighs more than the rifle some days. Dunn added, and some days, silence is the rifle. Kearns didn't answer, just nodded, eyes moist. He removed his gloves, handed them to Brooks. For the next sentinel, Brooks accepted them, folded them once. No, for the last. Kearns stepped into the rising sun. No escort, no anthem, only reflection. Back inside the barracks, the silence followed. Brooks placed the gloves inside the memorial cabinet. No plaque, no label, just placed and closed. Later that day, a new recruit arrived, nervous, eyes wide. He asked Reyes, do they really say nothing? Ever? Reyes smiled. Not nothing. The recruit frowned. What then? Reyes looked out at the tomb, at the frost melting on stone, at the flag swaying without music. They say everything, he whispered. That night, President Kearns issued a private memorandum to Congress. Some lines aren't drawn for show, some uniforms aren't worn for power, and some soldiers don't speak because their silence is the last voice of the fallen. No one saw it, except the families who needed to, and the soldiers who never left their post.